Hey Shannon, this is Michelle. I thought it might be easier to just make a little response recording rather than type everything out. It's sometimes I do better that way, and I thought maybe we could experiment a little to see if it would be which is more helpful to you. So I'll just kind of respond to you. Had some big questions in here. I just want to make sure I'm responding appropriately to my students' questions because those are the one things that matter the most to me. So I'm glad that you saw that predetermined outcomes. Um, yes, they are very frustrating for young children, and you can see where the resulting quote behavior or response and frustration, which is natural and a human response. And as adults, we definitely have them. But those are the things we often are, calling kids out on and punishing them for. And it's so sad. It's really, anyway. So, some other programs we're going to look at examine those kinds of things in different ways. So, I'm glad you see that. And so you wrote here about feeling sorry for them and anyway, yes, it is actually a very misunderstood idea that these children are actually experiencing sensory motor and emotional and other areas of life in a much more appropriate way than our children. And we do have some cultural expectations that we need to really think about. Yes, and it does create anxiety. And anyway, I'm glad you see that. So, questions to wonder about: are we being whipped into shape by our countries, controlled? Yes. Yes, I mean, our national values and norms definitely shape us. And I would say that your question about Americans being taught to be clueless and all of that, and I do not know how to learn more. There are lots and lots of really good resources, and you may be happy to know that even in some public school systems, kids are learning more about, especially indigenous cultures, which are the only cultures left now that practice life the way we saw it in the two countries in Mongolia and Namibia. But there are indigenous practices still alive in our own country, and I will make a note to myself to give you guys more options there. But in general, if you just research what are called the indigenous cultures of other countries and our own, you can learn a lot just by researching those cultures around the world, to understand more. There's loads online now. There's videos, there's, just about anything you can imagine. So, yeah, dive in and educate yourself, and ask me for resources if you want. There are all kinds of, I just tell adults, go look at the children's books about these cultures. Start there. Why not? Anyway, I hope that's helpful for now. But you're correct. We are not as educated about what we call indigenous cultures. Uh, the fine line between being positive to raising kids that feel perfect and entitled. I think I know what you mean here, and we are actually going to address the issue of what's different about being positive and versus praise, which is addictive and does create this feeling of being perfect and entitled. Um, so anyway, I think I know what you mean there, and I would say hold on to that question as we dive into some practices over the next few weeks and see if you get a new definition for being positive. Um, being positive does not equal praise. So maybe I'll just leave that with you for now and we can keep thinking about that. Carla talking about kids being in play and in walks in the district. Yes, I've heard about this a lot. Like for the last, I know a teacher who, what happened was the early childhood classrooms started opening up in public schools, and the principals did not know early childhood. So this was happening all over the country, and they were, putting teachers on probation for this. I mean, it's gotten a little better now that we have more principals who understand early childhood, but yes, this is a really important question, and it's why we need to get really good at our language, maybe even having handouts that we give to parents and folks about, hey, this is what is happening in my classroom. Here's all the documented learning. So some of these practices like learning stories, and Reggio Emilia has you documenting everything and hanging it up. That is an answer to that. And it's a good answer to it, and it works. So I'm glad. I hope Carla will talk about it too, since she mentioned it to you. In an early classroom, how do we switch from one subject to another? Are there no defined times? Yes, correct. There's no content areas like elementary school. Yeah, and content is not really a focus in early childhood. There are standards for certain types of learning, and a lot of teachers do separate their centers out and call it science and math. But honestly, in early childhood, everything is everything. So you can say you're doing math, but we don't really know early childhood. we have no control over children's thinking in early childhood, which is a good thing. So in, hopefully emotionally they're not so attached to our responses that they stop thinking and just worry more about how we're feeling about what they're doing. Because as soon as they tap into how they feel about what they're doing, they've stopped cognition. They're no longer absorbing any kind of information about the experience. They're very focused on how we are feeling about what they're doing. So I would say the answer is correct. No, there are not defined times like older elementary, but some preschools do it. They just should not be. The brain in a young child is not compartmentalized like that yet. So you could call it math, but the child will not experience it the way you think they are. So I hope that's helpful. Learning by play is not synonymous with correct. Maintain control of the class. We're not really looking to control the class as much as make sure everyone in the class is respected and safe. So yes, there should be no seat work in early childhood. They can sit down to eat, but they shouldn't be doing any seat work in early childhood. I know they are, but they should not be. It's not appropriate. No, we don't elaborate on seat work and look for moments to play. We play, document their experience and learning, and young children should not be doing any seat work, none. And in a good preschool, that's what you'll see. So I'm hoping once you do some observing, that this will become clearer to you, but I can also send you actually, in the play class, when I take it over, there are videos of this that I'm using, so stay tuned. Anyway, so I think people can assume it's a free-for-all we are talking about with a new... No, it's not a free-for-all at all. And there are ways of documenting the learning, like in learning stories that you saw, that, help us see that. We are not talking about classroom management with a new type of learning. We're not talking about classroom management at all. We're talking about setting up a classroom where everyone can learn the way they do best and have experiences that are appropriate for their age. So I would say take the words classroom management out of the mix and start thinking about safe classrooms, loving classrooms, respectful classrooms, and consider how those are created. And just keep through the semester, just keep thinking about it. And I would say, just in general, try not to draw any conclusions yet. Try not to figure it out yet. Just be with it all semester and see where you are after you observe and do videos. I've watched videos and talked with teachers. They tell me younger kids are a new type of kid. So all this is, I know, I hear this too. I think this comes from teachers who have a background that's more authoritarian. They want kids to do what they're told when they're told. They're wanting kids to not exhibit any kind of responses like this. But I will tell you that because of COVID, we need to let all that go and just look at what's happening. Hang in there a little while longer in class because we're going to explore some other things, and I'm hoping that this will help you. But I hear this too, and I only hear it from teachers who really want kids to just do what they're told and don't like any kind of, parting of the ways. I'm not sure what videos you're talking about. If you want to send me those, I'm happy to look at them and comment if that would be helpful. But I would say try to just listen to these teachers who are saying this. They've been at it for 20 years, and I don't want to make assumptions about them, but if you're asking me, have children changed over the last 20 years in terms of how they relate to us as teachers? The answer is yes, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So when we get to talking about the program Positive Discipline, we're going to dive into why that's true. But just a little hint is that, in our culture, there used to be a hierarchy of authority. Men were in charge. Women had to listen to men. Women were in charge of children. Children had to listen to women and men. And there was a definite hierarchy and a model of you have to listen to somebody who's more powerful than you, and you cannot question it, say anything about it, or you may end up being either emotionally or physically abused. So that was our culture. And in terms of authority, but that's changed, and that's a good thing. It's not good the way we used to do it. So we now have a culture where things have unraveled around models of authority and unquestioned authority. So over 20 years, yes, there's been a change. Over the last 5 years, there's been an even bigger change because of COVID. So we're going to be talking about this a lot in class, but I thought I'd give you a little hint. Are parents different? Are kids different? They absolutely are. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know what work they have to do in preschool. They shouldn't have any. So I don't know what that means. That's one question I have for these teachers. So anyway, this could be that they're asking kids to do things that are not developmentally appropriate, that kind of thing. I don't know much more about your situation that you're talking about, so I don't want to say much more. So I hope this has been helpful. Keep asking questions. Hang in there with your questions. Keep track of them. Something that I recommend my students do is take a document like this that you have created here with a lot of questions, and get yourself a ballpoint pen that has 4 colors on it, the ones that call black, blue, green, and red. write down your current thoughts under each one of these questions and say, start with the color black. Then, after you listen to me, choose a new color on the pen or another pen that's a different color, whichever way you do it, but represent your thinking now that you've heard my answers. Now, what are your thoughts? And write those in a new color. Then, after we talk about these in class every time over the semester, write your thoughts down in new colors as you learn more and more. This is a documented picture of your own learning. You're making your own learning visible. And I'll be talking about this in class. So, but for now, I thought I would get you started because you're a student with a lot of good questions. I love it. So, when you document that learning over time, this will allow you, when you become a teacher, to explain it to parents. You can say, look, I used to think this, then I thought this, then I thought that. You may not show them your exact words, but you'll be able to represent in a paper maybe later on in your career or your college life how you evolved as a learner yourself about these issues. Here were my questions, and here's how I changed over time about what I thought. So, and I would say write a note at the top, responses after I listened to Michelle's responses, and then write that. And then maybe responses after I did some research on indigenous cultures, and then write that. So, just make sure to change colors so it's actually visible. You can see yourself growing and learning. It's really amazing. So that's, you don't have to do that, but I have had my students tell me that's a really great strategy. So, okay, bye-bye.